Welcome back to Sawtooth Tactical and week 5 of the MK18 build series. And big news this week is we actually have a lower now. And yes, that is a pistol brace on it. We'll talk about that, but I am excited. We've got a ton of new stuff, and this thing is coming very close to being finished. Very close. Not quite there. There's going to be at least one more week left, but I got the last part for the upper. We're going to talk about that and a bunch of parts for the lower because I've been waiting on it already, so I'd already been collecting parts. And we're going to talk about why it's got an SB tactical brace on it instead of a stock. I'm sure you could probably figure that out already. But if you are enjoying the build series so far, make sure you're subscribed. And let's talk about what we've added this week. So we're going to get deep into this lower in a minute because I wanted a very specific lower receiver for this build. This is the Griffin Armament MK2 ambi lower receiver. And I specifically wanted this lower, and we're going to talk about why, and we're going to compare it a little bit to the ADM UIC ambi lower that I used on my 14.5-inch build. Because there's a lot of similarities, but also more differences than I really realized before I got this lower. But I am very happy with it so far. But before we get into the lower, I want to talk about the last part that I added to the upper. This upper receiver probably looks pretty much the same as it did in last week's episode, except for one part. So we started, again, just a little bit of a recap. Daniel Defense stripped MK18 upper with the mil-spec plus brown RIS2 quad rail. I added an ASR compatible muzzle device so that I could use my Otter Creek Labs Polonium K. We've got an EOTech EXPS2 on a Unity riser. Daniel Defense fixed iron sights in that same mil-spec plus brown. Mod Light 18650 with the OKW head, with a mod button and an Arasaka mount. We've got the Magpul rail ladders, Emissary handbrake. We've got a Radian Raptor charging handle in flat dark earth, and a Microbest chrome bolt carrier group. Well, what did I add then? Well, what I added was this dust cover. And the reason for that is because the only part of this whole thing that I thought felt and looked a little bit cheap was the plastic Daniel Defense dust cover. And it's funny to me, the last two uppers I've bought, this one from Daniel Defense and the Volter MUR modular upper receiver, they both came with plastic dust covers. And I don't know, I like these ones from Forward Controls. I think they look really good, they're billet. And instead of getting a big flashy one this time, I got a green one here, I got a flat dark earth one here. I just went with black with the twin dimple for this build because this isn't supposed to be a flashy gun. I want it to look very, not clone correct obviously, but the word I'm using is clone close. It's the Sawtooth Tactical version of a MK18, but having a flashy dust cover just didn't seem right. So I went with black, but I still went with the Forward Controls design dust cover here. Now, before we get into the lower receiver and what I think of this Griffin MK2 lower so far, let's have a quick word from our channel partner. If you'd like to help support Sawtooth Tactical, the very best way to do that is to click the first link in the description. That link is aura.com/sawtooth-tactical. If you use my link, you get a 2-week free trial. And you can quit anytime, but you probably want to stick with it as I have. What has Aura done for me? Well, I don't get any spam calls anymore. I don't get spam emails. I don't get calls from scammers. What they do is they find all the data brokers that have your information online. They submit opt-out requests on your behalf so that you don't get scammers and spam calls anymore. But they do a lot of other things too. They have a VPN, which just helps to protect your privacy. They've got a ton of stuff, And it all comes in at a very low price. If you stick with it after that 2 weeks, it is only $12 a month. I think Aura is pretty cool because they sponsor gun-related channels, which not a lot of sponsors are willing to do that. And it really helps channels like mine be able to produce this kind of content. YouTube doesn't really like to monetize gun-related videos anymore. And so sponsors like Aura make things like Mark 18 builds possible. So check it out. It's definitely worth trying it out for 2 weeks. Like I said, you're probably going to want to stick with it. I don't have to worry about scammers anymore. I don't have to worry about spam calls, spam emails. And that's been really nice. I use my phone for work, and so I have to answer calls that I don't recognize all the time. And none of them are scammers anymore. And I really like that. So again, check it out. First link in the description, aura.com/sawtooth-tactical. I can almost guarantee that you're going to love it. Check it out. This is that plastic dust cover. It says Daniel Defense on it, and I'm sure it is perfectly fine and would do the job that a dust cover does just fine. But on a build this nice, I just wanted a metal dust cover, and so there we go. That's my reasoning for that. And that was when I said last week that I had one more part for the upper. It was that. Although there actually is one more part for the upper coming this week. So we'll talk about that next week. But the upper, I mean, at this point is pretty much done. This is what the upper receiver for my Mark 18 is going to look like. I don't have a lot more to do on the upper. So the timing was perfect though. Finished the upper right when the lower came in. Now I've been waiting on my local shop, Guffey's Gun and Pawn, to get this Griffin Armament Mark II lower in since I started this build. And it finally came in last week, which makes me very happy. Now, why am I using the Griffin Mark II lower? Well, I used the ADM UIC lower on my last build, and I absolutely love that lower. I think it looks really, really good, and I love the ambi controls on it. Well, Griffin Armament helped ADM design that lower. And so Griffin Armament's own lower has very similar controls. I thought that they're the exact same controls until I had one in my hand. And like I said, they're very similar. So it's got the same ambi bolt catch and release, although the Griffin Armament one is actually a little bit longer than the one on the ADM, which I kind of like. Makes it a little bit easier to get your finger on it when you're in a firing grip. It's just slightly longer, but other than that, very much the same. It also has an ambi mag release on the back, although the Griffin Armament lower comes more stripped than the ADM one. So this ADM lower was called a stripped lower, but because so many of the parts are proprietary, I mean, it came with the pins already in it, your takedown pins. It came with, obviously, the proprietary bolt catch and release, and it came with the ambi mag release, the whole assembly in it. The Griffin Armament one is a little bit more stripped, and while you do pay about half as much money for this lower as you do for this one, you do get a little bit less as well. Now, for one, it doesn't have the fancy machining on the magwell, but that's what I wanted. For a Mark 18, I wanted it to look closer to mil spec, closer to clone correct. And the fancy ADM lower would not have looked right, in my opinion, with the Mark 18 build. And so that was a big reason why I wanted the Griffin Armament one. The other big reason was same controls, cheaper price point. And while that is true, the price point is cheaper and the controls are very close to the same. You do, like I said, you get a little bit less for it. Now, you also get a little bit more in some ways. So the Griffin Armament lower is actually forged, not billet. So technically it's a little bit stronger, which is sweet. But like I said, it comes more stripped. So I waited until I got the lower before I ordered the rest of my lower parts, because when I got the ADM one, it turned out I didn't really need to order many lower parts except for the stuff that you would pick anyway, like your trigger, your safety, buffer system, things like that, your grip. But it came with the pins and all that stuff and the mag release and everything. So as far as the lower parts kit, all I really needed was the buffer retainer pin on that one. Well, this one, you need a little bit more. So as you can see, I don't have my buffer retainer pin yet, which is why the Geissele Super 42 H3 isn't installed yet, because there's nothing to hold it in there. H3 Geissele Super 42 should be, from all of my research, the perfect buffer and spring for a suppressed Mark 18. We'll see if that's true. I sure hope it is. Hopefully by next week, we'll be able to take this thing out and shoot it. I'm just waiting for those last few parts to come in. So I've got a buffer retainer coming from Forward Control's Design. They make really good stuff. It's a reinforced one. I know your buffer retainer probably not going to break, but it definitely won't if you pay a few bucks more for it, right? I also had to order a mag release. Now the ambi here, the way it works is with a standard mag release. So we'll get into all of those parts when they come in. Just wanted to talk about the lower itself first. Now the actual paddles and stuff are also a little bit different than the ADM ones, but still has a nice large paddle here. Although honestly, when I have an ambi bolt catch and release, I find myself using that ambi one and not using this side as much. So that doesn't quite matter to me as much as this side does, to be honest, and that's why I paid extra for ambi. So what have we added to the lower so far? Well, this is a Geissele buffer tube and a Geissele trigger, and I got them as blems during their 4th of July sale, just like I did with the Mod Light that I got from the Mod Light blem sale. Blems are the way to go. This Mod Light, I have not been able to find a blemish on it. Well, the Geissele buffer tube I could, but you know what? The blemish gets covered up by your stock or brace, so does not bother me. As far as the blem trigger, I couldn't find anything different about it than my other Geissele triggers. So this is the Super Dynamic Enhanced trigger, and because it was a blem, it was cheaper. I love the SDE trigger. It's 2-stage. It's got a very smooth take-up, an extremely light, crisp break. The SDC might be the more appropriate trigger for a Mark 18, but I really like that light crispness of the SDE. That's what I've got in my 14.5 inch, and it is my very favorite trigger that I've ever tried. And so why would I not put my very favorite trigger ever in my Mark 18 as well? Of course, I also used the Radian Talon ambidextrous safety set at 45 degrees in flat dark earth. I've got this same safety on like 5 ARs, and so I'm used to the way it feels, and I like it. I know that people say the FCD, the Badger Ordnance, that there are other safeties that they like better than the Radian one, but I love the Radian safety. I love the Radian charging handle, and so I use what I know and like. And of course, the FDE. Now, for the stock and grip, and I say stock, and I do mean stock, I am using the B5 Systems Bravo stock. Now, I know that the SOP mod stock is the clone correct stock, but I love the Bravo stock. I've got it on 5 different ARs in every color now that they have them. I'm pretty sure I've got flat dark earth, OD green, I've got black ones, and now I've got the Coyote tan as well. And I want the Coyote tan for the grip and the stock for one reason. It was kind of closer to this Mil-Spec Plus brown, and so I kind of just like that darker color. I've got FDE a lot on this thing, but also black. And so I thought that the Coyote tan would look really good with it, and I do think that it does. Although I am colorblind, so if you think it doesn't, let me know down in the comments. Now, why do I have a brace on it? Well, because technically right now, this is not a short-barreled rifle. This will be a pistol build initially until I get it SBR'd, which I am going to do here very soon. But I'm going to get the gun put together and take it to the range, make sure it runs, spend all the money on the parts to build the thing before I send the government money for a tax stamp to be able to change out the piece of plastic on the back of my gun. And it's really sad that that's something that I even have to think about when it comes to building, and that I can't just use what I want and what's going to end up on it. until I pay the government $200 and apply for a tax stamp, which I've already done plenty of times. So it's just one of those things that I will have to deal with. Luckily, at least the one brace that I have kept just in case I needed it for a future short barreled build is the one that has this tan strap on it. And so the black and tan actually goes really well with the rest of this build. And so for having a brace on it for now, I think that this is probably the best brace option that I've got without spending more money on another brace. This actually was the brace that used to be on my 300 Blackout before that one was SBR'd. So this will get a stock once it is SBR'd. But for now, because I've got a YouTube channel and the ATF could be watching this channel if they felt, so inclined, I will be running it with the brace until that tax stamp is approved. Let me know what you guys think about my choices so far, but the Griffin Armament Ambi Lower, I love that it looks very close to mil spec, but it still has my favorite Ambi controls. I like this very much. It's kind of like a bad lever, but not in your trigger guard. And I actually do end up using the Ambi mag release quite a bit on this gun, more than I thought I would as a right-handed shooter. Now, I am left-handed, but I shoot right-handed because I'm right-eye dominant. And I do use both of the Ambi controls quite a bit. And so, to me, Ambi is worth the extra money. And this Griffin Armament Lower is super high quality. The machining is fantastic. Low shelf, M16 cut, Ambi Lower, and it costs about half as much as the ADM one. I love the ADM Lower, don't get me wrong, but if you want those same controls, but at a more, affordable price, this Griffin Armament Mark II Lower is a great way to go. Now we'll see how all this stuff works once I get it put together and take it to the range. I'd have it together today if I actually had the pins for it, but those should be coming next week. So next week I should have all the rest of the lower parts and my last part for the upper, and we'll have this thing put together. Now, one more quick thing I do want to add. The funny thing about putting together this upper, most of this stuff, it's like bolt-on. I mean, tactical Legos is what I've called it before. The most probably insignificant part is this dust cover. And of course, that was the most difficult part to install. Now, why was this difficult to install? Well, because in order to get it off, the handguard has to come off. In order for the handguard to come off, the actual barrel nut has to be taken off because of the way that the RIS-2 handguard locks up to the barrel nut here. This part, in order to get it out of the way of the rod for this dust cover, has to come forward and off. And then the only way to do that is to actually take the barrel nut off. So I had to order a barrel nut wrench from Daniel Defense and literally take the whole front end of this gun apart just to change out the dust cover. So let me know also in the comments if you think that's worth it or not, or if you think I'm just ridiculous for adding a different black dust cover, but I like it. I think it looks great. And it just changed out the only plastic part there that I thought kind of just looked and felt cheap. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. If you're enjoying this series, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any further episodes of the Mark 18 build series. Let me know down in the comments what you think so far of the choices I've made on this build, what you would do differently if you're building your own Mark 18 or if you have your own Mark 18. And from Sawtooth Tactical, stay strapped to get clapped.